That's right, I did it! 30 anime, 31st episodes. I watched all of it. The good, the bad, and the really, really ugly. In this video, I'll tell you all about all 30 anime that came out this season, and along the way, I'll recommend which ones are worth watching. Then, at the end, I'll be making a tier list. The anime included in this video are only new releases, no sequels. We're also only doing full-length affairs, so no web-exclusive quickies. That means we'll be covering the following anime. Solo Leveling. My instant death ability is so overpowered, no one in this other world stands a chance. The wrong way to use healing magic. Unwanted undead adventure. Delicious in dungeon. Tales of wedding rings. Villainous level 99. I may be the hidden boss, but I'm not the demon lord. Hokkaido Gals are super adorable. The foolish angel dances with the devil. The strongest tank's labyrinth raids. A tank with a rare 9999 resistance got kicked from the hero's party. Fluffy Paradise. 7th time loop. The villainess enjoys a carefree life married to her worst enemy. Ishura. Sasaki and Peeps. The Witch and the Beast. The Weakest Tamer began a journey to pick up trash Dr. Elise. Gushing over magical girls. Metallic Rouge. 'Tis time for Torture Princess. A sign of affection. Mr. Villain's Day Off, Soko Yoko, Life of Pane, BCIgiri. Cherry Magic, 30 years of virginity can make you a wizard. Delusional Monthly Magazine, Snack Busui, Bang Brave Bang Bravered, and Meiji Gekon 1874. Of those, 5 are anime originals, and depending on how you want to count it, 13 of them are isekais. Let's jump into this. Solo Leveling is a comic I have seen promoted and hyped up for ages. It is no surprise to me that it is getting an anime adaptation despite being a Korean comic. All of that said, however, having seen it, I am not quite sure I get the hype. A mere one episode is not enough for me to discount it. I'm certain there are more good moments to come, but right now it all feels pretty by the books. The story is set in modern day, but with JRPG elements, such as stats, magic, and dungeon crawls. Poor people go into the dangerous dungeons to grab important fuel sources in exchange for a pittance of money, and it clearly is going for some sort of critique of capitalism, which feels structurally sound but well trodden. I'm hoping they do something interesting with it as time goes on. Another thing that feels a bit generic is the setup. Our protagonist is super weak and joins a party of people stronger than him, and it feels very, very obvious that every person around him is going to get killed off, maimed, or otherwise utilized as trauma fuel for him. He'll be one of the only ones to make out alive. Hold on, let me check episode 2. Okay, I watched episode 2, and the start of 3. Yeah, most of them died, and it was all a bunch of, fuel for character work for the protagonist's sake. All of that said, though, it was well-executed character work. The kind of thing that could very easily shock and enrapture someone who hasn't seen anything that uses the same tricks as this one, pulling off tropes and techniques which are classic but uncommon due to their difficulty. The story isn't so obsessed with its protagonist or its premise that it loses itself. The whole first arc was very, very in the weeds on how to beat a certain enemy, and by carefully balancing twists, betrayals, puzzles, and a feeling of threat, it managed to pull off a certain type of tension I usually associate with Kaiji Ultimate Survivor, which might sound like a passing statement, but it is in reality one of the best compliments I can give a show. My instant death ability is so overpowered no one in this other world stands a chance against me is an isekai like many others, in the sense that it is desperate to not be like other isekais, building up so many layers of self-protective irony that it ironically becomes generic. A whole bus of people get thrown into another world where a cute girl tells them that they were brought here to be heroes and that they have been given magical powers, but wait, oh no, she starts murdering people who mildly upset her, seems that she's evil. That really subverted my expectations. It also totally subverted my expectations when the high schooler who took charge decided to sociopathically leave the weakest 4 members of the group behind as bait for a dragon that was heading their way. You want to know what really subverts my expectations? When the female lead asks why the protagonist, who doesn't care about other people, decided to protect her, and he gives the hilarious answer that it was because he is physically attracted to her. I presume the person who wrote this read Chainsaw Man and didn't fully grasp why it was that Denji was likable, so we really are just left with a main duo devoid of any meaningful connection. But none of that subverts my expectations harder than when a bunch of people come back to the female lead expecting her to be dead, planning to use necromancy to raise her body, and then just right in her until they on and on and on and on, just all day, just. And it's revealed that they actually got summoned here before and defeated a demon lord, which is why they are very familiar with how this world works, but then we properly reveal that the protagonist is even stronger than they are with his instant death ability. Now, all of this is literally subversive in the sense that we are set up to expect one thing and then given another, but all of the punchlines, all of the apparently unexpected things, are things which have been done to death by other stories. The telltale sign of it is the show's own disinterest in its own subversive elements. It reveals that these scumbag characters have actually been isekai'd here before and were heroes. How do you go on a quest to stop a demon lord and not come out the other side having changed your perspective and grown as a person? That's fascinating. But the story doesn't think it's fascinating. The story never stopped to consider there were any substantive elements to delve into here because it just stole it from somewhere else. It is deeply uninvested with all of the stuff that could make it interesting. His instant death ability is given caveats to ensure that it has no weaknesses that could even theoretically be brought up. None of the people betraying the protagonist are fleshed out in the slightest. It's just spinning its wheels. Would not recommend. Coming off the back of that one, we have an isekai that is shockingly well written. If it weren't for the meta-narrative within the story, where the characters are aware of isekai tropes, an unsavvy viewer would assume that this story is actually quite original and not following a craze. This is because it carries itself with confidence, poise, and precision in a way that comes off as weird in a genre so associated with trash. The intro of the story has nothing to do with isekais for the most part. A loner in school meets the two most popular kids, the president and the vice president of the student council, and walks home with them in the rain, having a very friendly conversation that characterizes the three of them and causes them to hit it off really well as friends. This would be an amazing first scene for any genre of fiction involving high schoolers, from rom-com to battle shonen. Things only get isekai-esque when they suddenly get summoned to the other world, and the common collective Stuco president gets incredibly excited at the thought of being an isekai protagonist, in a moment which actually subverted my expectations in an unironic and thoroughly enjoyable manner. We then get a slew of isekai tropes and setup. They comedically make it so that healing magic, typically a common staple of any adventuring party, is considered rare and dangerous. But the most dangerous part of it is that the person who trains people to be healers terrifies everyone, and they fear for the protagonist's safety should she get her hands on him. Honestly, none of what I've been set up to expect is particularly fresh outside of the fact that the story is engagingly written, in no small part because it is told from the perspective of three entirely likable characters who get along, care about each other, and deserve happiness. I recommend this one. Unwanted Undead Adventure is set in a world of JRPG mechanics and follows a very low-ranked adventurer who becomes a skeleton in a dungeon. We follow his exploration through the dungeon as he tries to kill other enemies and level up into stronger levels of undead so that he can eventually become a vampire and blend in with society once more. It suffers from a very familiar problem, which is exclusively focusing on its premise to the expense of all other considerations. A character turning into a skeleton and needing to level up is an interesting prospect, but it becomes incredibly flat when it's happening to a character we just don't care very much about, in a world we don't care very much about. The protagonist is bland, and after the in media res opening, he blandly explains the generic details of this world to us. A lot of this exposition is the kind of thing that is so endemic to the genre that it is very easy to get away with not explaining it. Like, we don't need to be told what an adventurer's guild is. It is trying to do one thing, and it does succeed in doing that one thing. It is a level-up procedural, and he does indeed grow stronger over the course of a series of combat encounters as he engages with JRPG mechanics. But, like I said, the story really needs some heart to it. There is a woman who the protagonist learned about monsters from, and we see her comment to herself about how he hasn't shown up in a while. And that's, like, emotional to some baseline extent. Why doesn't he have that? What if this woman was important to him and he was trying to integrate into society so he could see her again? Or maybe he has a family to return to, or a promise to keep, or something. But he's got nothing like that. And as with much of Japan's trashy fantasy anime, it doesn't interrogate the ideas within its world building. He can't go back into society because undead are considered an affront to the holy order or to nature or something like that. But how does he feel about the undead? Does being a skeleton fill him with self-loathing as he himself is an affront to God? Does he think the clergy are ridiculous and not put stock into their teachings? And if so, what else about them does he not like? This is an important cultural concept in this world, but it exists purely for the sake of plot convenience. The story just isn't that well thought out. I wouldn't recommend this one. Delicious in dungeon is something that I have seen hyped up, and I am really just going to need to take people's word on this one. The story as it starts is cute, if nothing else. Some adventurers who got their asses whooped in a dungeon need to venture back into it to retrieve a corpse so that it can be revived, but they need to deal with the fact that hunger is a major enemy while dungeon crawling, and so they learn to turn the monstrous wildlife of the dungeon into tasty meals. The whole thing kind of feels like it was adapted as a joke, like, here's a fantasy story that's 50% cooking. How funny would it be if we just poured a bunch of budget and energy into animating the cooking into looking really, really good? And like, yeah, it's entertaining, but I don't really see how this could last 12 episodes without growing stale, pardon the pun. That said, the story is heavily respected, as I understand, and it takes on a very engaging narrative as time goes on, apparently, and I do find myself growing quite attached to the characters, so I'm going to give this one a tentative recommendation. I'm pretty sure there's greatness to be had. Probably. Tales of Wedding Rings is so bad that I am going to make a video about it on my channel. The story is the exact kind of thing that I would be into. A man follows his love interest into a fantasy land because he loves her and accidentally crashes her arranged wedding in the process, and then is gifted with marriage-themed superpowers that he needs to activate with her. However, there are a number of problems. The first is that despite it literally being based around an initial core ship, the story has the incredibly ominous harem tag, which I am not looking forward to seeing unfold. But the bigger problem is that the main couple just sucks. They're not toxic or anything, but calling them bland is almost giving them too much credit. Like, when you start a story like this, a story that is about a couple, you want to establish them as something to root for. You want to give them chemistry. Him chasing her means nothing if their romance isn't compelling, but the story's idea of demonstrating their chemistry as a couple is to have her cook for him, have him find her physically attractive, and then have them go on a festival date together. That's not even low-hanging fruit, that's just grass you plucked off the ground. Those details are fine, but on their own they lack any and all substance. The story completely failed its initial premise, and I cannot recommend it. Villainous level 99, I may be the hidden boss but I'm not the demon lord, is an otome isekai, which means I am instantly positively predisposed to it, and don't get me wrong, it is a little on the trashy side, but it is something I've been quite enjoying, enough that I actually caught up on the manga. The premise is simple. A little girl within the world of an otome game who is destined to become a big villain regains memories of a past life where her past self played the very game she now inhabits. So she decides to start power leveling in dungeons from the age of 5, miraculously survives, and when she starts going to high school with all of the game's protagonists, she discovers she is currently the strongest thing in the known universe and has to deal with the ensuing tension and drama. The story is a power fantasy, but a fairly well-handled one in my opinion. The protagonist, being at once lacking in affect and also deeply silly in her internal monologue, is very engaging and she plays off the rest of the cast in interesting ways. The focus is on the relationships she reluctantly forms with other people, and while there are definitely wish fulfillment elements to the power fantasy, it's not too masturbatory and is just often used for gag comedy. This may be my OI bias talking, but I would recommend this one. Hokkaido Girls Are Super Adorable is an incredibly mid rom-com, if you could even call it that, and I am miffed that they managed to get Masayoshi Oishi to do the theme song for it. The story is simple. A city boy from Tokyo moves to live with his family in the countryside, and an attractive girl his age gets an instant crush on him and begins aggressively flirting with him. It is wish fulfillment boiled down to its basic elements. This girl just kind of thinks this guy is cute, so she starts flirting with him a bunch, and then he gets flustered and stares at her body. It's not particularly complicated. The reason I say I struggle to call this a rom-com is because their chemistry is so bare bones and clearly influenced by hormones more than any kind of genuine emotional bond they share, that it feels less like the start of a moving love story and more like the prelude to a relationship that lasts like 4 months tops. Don't get me wrong, they do, hold a conversation well, they enjoy each other's company, it is cute. As a matter of fact, it is just cute enough that the fact that it will become a harem story is fairly upsetting. The story knows what it is at the very least, and for that I can give it some props, but at times it could come off as indulgent to the point of being tacky, feeling less like it's presenting you with an appealing scenario and more so presenting you with a framing device that it can use to shove as many appealing scenarios into it as possible while still being technically coherent. The most interesting part of it is the dub. Hokkaido comes with its own accent, which the dub decides to localize as a thick Canadian accent, but not every character has one, and the main character who definitely does, the main love interest, usually isn't speaking with it, almost like the actress only remembers to lay the accent on thick when she notices an EH ? Is coming up later on the page. Also regarding the dub, the male lead and the female lead share voice actors with Hero from Darling in the Franxx, and Child Hero from Darling in the Franxx. And I just think that's special. The story apparently nosedives in quality before getting better at, like, chapter 90, but the anime's probably not getting there, so honestly I wouldn't recommend this. There doesn't seem to be anything to look forward to. Okay, up next is The Foolish Angel Dances with a Devil. This romantic comedy is about a devil from hell who goes to the human world to find a charismatic girl to turn into an idol that the devil world can rally around in their war against heaven. He finds a girl he has a crush on and who he thinks will suffice, and, well, she turns out to be an angel who then proceeds to kick his ass. The story has some pretty good action, and I like the more magic-y debuffs fighting style of the angel versus the more brute force methods of the demon, and it's all quite well adapted, but what weirds me the hell out is what happens, after. She forces him, with threat of death, to enter into a contract with her where he becomes her slave and can't disobey her. Things get weird. Like, this isn't just someone turning their kink into world building, this is straight up softcore kink content. I hear that it gets less weird as it goes on, but as things are, it seriously fails the vibe check. All of that said, the story has an interesting hook and the characterization is fantastic. While it's definitely weird and not for me, I have to give this one a hearty recommendation for those who are into this kind of thing. The Strongest Tank's Labyrinth Raids, a tank with a rare 9999 resistance skill got kicked from the hero's party, is an incredibly mediocre native isekai story that is somewhat reminiscent of Beast Tamer. The protagonist is kicked out of the hero's party despite being incredibly useful because his skills are not appreciated, and then he goes on to prove that his skills are worth something. The story falls into all of the pitfalls somewhat inherent to this idea. The shallow villain, the weird mix of being overly preachy but also not having anything to say, the incredibly predictable way the plot progresses, it's all standard procedure in a plot archetype that frankly is in need of innovation. This is not a situation where playing the hits is a particularly strong move. The exposition is bad, and the plot somewhat slow, but there is a lot to like here. I enjoy how low to the ground it is in terms of stakes. Our hero goes out and uses his abilities to solve personal problems and improve people's lives in small ways, and it's really trying to get you to care via the heart of the show rather than cheap thrills or completely fabricated stakes, and it does have heart. The main love interest has a bland but cute dynamic with the protagonist, and the homunculus he rescues partway in has a fun dynamic with him too. And I like how they point out earlier how people with the appraisal skill are rare, so it sets up for when the homunculus has it as a nice little setup and payoff. Very basic, but, you know, it's not the kind of thing you see done competently in this genre very often. But most importantly, unlike Beast Tamer, this guy proves he isn't worthless by, being a tank. Unlike Rain, who proved he was a Chad by just punching things to death after borrowing powers, the protagonist of 9999 actually serves as a tank in fights. It's cool. All of that said, the story is still pretty low-rent trash. It's maybe worth a shot if this is your kind of thing, but otherwise I'd skip it. It's relatively well-made filler, but filler nonetheless. Fluffy Paradise is yet another bad isekai. The premise is that when a woman is isekai'd as compensation for dying of overwork and is asked what power she wants, she asks to be given the power to pet fluffy things. The god interprets this as giving her the power to attract the attention and affection of all animals. Also, there's a thing he mentions about her being the one to decide if humans are, treating non-human races properly and if they should continue to exist, but that doesn't come up again for the rest of the episode. She gets isekai'd into the body of a young child, a daughter of a duke, and everything is wholesome and perfect, and the prince is being weirdly love interest coded despite the age gap, which I do not enjoy. The show is boring. It's meant to be feel-good fun, but other than aesthetics, it's got no heart going for it. It's a cute girl playing with cute animals in an idyllic little life. And I mean idyllic. She went into an arena to watch something, and I was thinking this was when, like, the racism she was expected to judge was gonna happen, but no, the contents of the arena battle are fully and entirely wholesome, mostly just students trying out against simulations. It seems that in this world, where there's a whole bunch of racism that is so bad a god is thinking of exterminating the perpetrators, the ruling class are all just a bunch of great guys you'd want to have a drink with. It's not a crime to have wholesome nobility in your story, but given how the story started, it's incongruent. The greatest sin of this story really is just how boring it is. All conflicts are set up in a way where you know how it'll be resolved. Like, when this dragon went out of control, it was obvious she was just going to tame it. There was no care given to creating any kind of meaningful tension. If it wasn't trying to be tense, that'd be one thing, but it is, and it's failing at it. I would not recommend this one. 7th time loop. The villainess enjoys a carefree life, married to her worst enemy, is yet another otome isekai, this time of the time loop variety. Otome isekais are defined by a protagonist living the life of a character in an otome game or fantasy romance novel, but having knowledge of what will happen within the story, and while this is often done via isekai, it is often also done via a time loop. Our character has relived a Groundhog Day period of 5 years, always dying at the end of each one, and this is her 7th time around. She plans on just lazing about for all of it, but winds up marrying the person who killed her in battle during her last life. Speaking of the scene where he kills her, an odd thing about this adaptation is that the budget is insane. The story itself is quite good. They adapted a fairly competent example of this genre, and it's one that I'd recommend to people trying to get into it, but they did not need to go as hard as they did in animating every last fight scene and ballroom dancing scene to be filled with genuinely incredible sakuga. The directing is of special note too, with the opening action sequence having a sense of impending dread, which was excellently put together. Like many stories in this genre, it features a dark romance bad boy. He's not literally the Duke of the Cold North, but he is spiritually. Dark hair, brooding, absurdly powerful, and obsessed with the female lead. In a nice example of this trope, he's actually a good person and a kind ruler, with the story being willing to delve into the actual economic hardships of a feudal system, and features a male lead pushing for what is, contextually, fairly progressive economic reforms that the story takes seriously as a plot point. The female lead is competent but not infallible. She's flawed but likable, and the chemistry between her and the male lead is constantly apparent. It's got a good romance, some politicking, excellent action, and is altogether everything you could want from this genre, even if it does nothing groundbreaking. I'd recommend this one. Ishura starts as a walking contradiction. It shows us a beautifully drawn town undergoing a laughably animated earthquake, pairing many moments of beautiful sakuga with incredibly clumsily inserted photographs of real-world rocks that look miserably out of place. The world feels fresh, alive, and full of interesting tidbits, all coming together to reveal that the world is not actually all that original, and is instead trafficking in the usual trappings of isekai stories, and is merely being told from the perspective of a random, insignificant bystander from the world that gets isekai'd into. All that is to say that the story is impressive, but mixed in its execution, with each of its problems being paired with a comparable triumph, with every terrible CGI enemy being taken out by a beautifully animated sword flourish, every terribly paced and horribly rushed exposition dump followed by a genuinely engaging sequence of action and horror. It does, however, have some genuine strengths that are not significantly weighed down by its comparable weaknesses. The main thing that the story does well is its core conflict. Our hero, Yuna, is just a nobody, and she comes across this incredibly overpowered isekai protagonist who destroys the massive robot who ravaged Yuna's hometown and killed her loved ones. However, Yuna believes that it is likely that he is the very reason that the slumbering giant awoke in the first place. This swordsman from Earth is completely ambivalent to the well-being of others, only caring about having fights that he finds enjoyable, so she finds it likely that he is a danger to all those around him. I was hoping she'd tell this to his face, have a confrontation with him, but she did something so much more narratively interesting. She pretended to have a positive opinion of him, and then offered to be his guide, all while plotting to bring him into contact with people who could kill him once and for all. This is very engaging drama, and a great setup for what's to come. I think the story has a lot of potential, so I'm giving it my recommendation. Sasaki and Peeps is a delightfully meta isekai story about a salaryman who decides to take up a bird as his pet, only to find out that this bird has the mind of a sage from another world and is capable of using magic and teaching him magic. He gains the ability to do magic thanks to her and is able to travel to and from the other world in order to make money, which goes off without a hitch. But later, he accidentally winds up in a completely unrelated storyline about humans in his world with psychic abilities, which people now believe he has, and he doesn't know how to tell them that he actually has magic and is completely unrelated to the stuff they have going on. It's a story that feels almost brought down by its isekai setting. The introduction of the other world is completely casual. It just goes, yeah, it's another world in an isekai, you already know what this is about. As a result, the world building is deeply unengaging, though maybe it was a good idea, considering how the psychic subplot is generic as hell. Maybe skipping past that stuff is smart. The story is helped greatly by its protagonist. While having self-centered goals of earning a good life, he is nevertheless a kind and lovable guy with lots of fun little quirks and a whole cute thing where he loves adorable pets. He's supportive, generous, and has a moment where he overcomes cowardice in order to save someone. It's all really nice. There is one teensy little detail I kind of am bothered by. There is this teenage girl he lives next door to that he talks to throughout the episode. She seems to have a troubled home life, and he talks with her whenever he gets home from work and in the mornings, but it's implied at the end of episode 1 that she has clingy romantic feelings for him despite the age difference, and, you know, I get it, he's a catch. I wish it was something else. This one's fine, I suppose it gets a soft recommendation. The Witch and the Beast is a refreshingly confident and atmospheric action fantasy story about a 20th century setting with witches, starring a duo of witch hunters. One of them is capable of using powerful magic, but not magic that can compare to that of a witch. The other is a powerful magical beast trapped in the body of a young woman, capable of temporarily returning to her original body, which her partner carries on his back in a coffin. And she can do that whole return back to her body by kissing a witch on the lips. It's pretty wild, with the dark fantasy action being especially brutal and kinetic, with every attack feeling impactful, in no small part due to the heroine's ability to survive just about any injury, meaning the author can just let her get brutalized. The magic system makes for exciting and interesting fights, with witches feeling like they are immensely powerful, but still being meaningfully limited. The dynamic between the two leads is delightfully tense, with him being condescending and kind of a dick, but ultimately respecting her on some level, possibly even caring, and her being very single-minded and straightforward, never showing much empathy, but nevertheless going along with what he says for the most part. They're a duo who trust each other despite their differences. It's a bit confusing where the story plans on going from here, with weird pseudo-racism against witches as kind of a theme, but it's all done with a lot of flair, confidence, and drama that makes it irresistible to soak up, at least this early on. The Witch and the Beast is incredible, both aesthetically and from a storytelling perspective. It's so fun to sit through, and I really, really want to keep watching it. I recommend this one. The Weakest Tamer began a journey to pick up trash is an isekai that does not feel like an isekai. Frankly, it feels more like the start of a Ghibli film. We see a young girl exiled from her village due to fear of her being cursed for reasons having to do with RPG mechanics. We see this stunning slice-of-life montage of her living her days as a self-sufficient kid, the horror of her situation mixing with the serene beauty of the gorgeously drawn landscapes, giving it an atmospheric tone that is difficult to match. The first episode winds up being about her finding a species of slime so fragile, so short-lived, that there's barely any information about them because they're so hard to study. She, though, does know that it will live a short life, and so she protects it from gusts of wind and other dangers, staying with it till the end of its 24-hour lifespan to keep it company. In the end, it manages to survive, and she tames it with her taming magic before continuing on her quest. Everything about this screams artsy and wholesome, which isn't what you expect from an isekai, but here we are. And it is an isekai. She has memories from a past life, which she needs to rely on to survive, but in a twist, those memories take the form of almost a guardian spirit, whispering advice into her mind. It's all well considered, innovative, and works splendidly. I recommend this one. Dr. Elise was a perfectly fine Otome isekai story. A villainess in an Otome isekai-coded world dies and reincarnates in this world, deciding to live her life as a doctor, and in the process she becomes an absolute legend when it comes to performing complicated and dangerous surgery. When she dies in this life, she comes back in her old one, giving her the chance to do things right this time. The first episode takes time to cover her life as a doctor in our world, not glossing by it like many similar stories would, giving it a sense that it's trying to be more than just a trashy rendition on a classic formula. This one's trying to be something, and it does succeed in being kinda boring? It's not atrocious, it's not committing anything unforgivable, but it's slow, has a lot of cliches, and uses a fair helping of show don't tell. Episode 1 is a bit of a slog, with the story not really knowing how to do elegant exposition, but the episode ends strong. Our protagonist is in a plane crash, but actually survives. There is a heartwarming, heart-wrenching scene where she goes to all of the different people who survived the crash, caring for their wounds while ignoring her own, dying after saving one last person and succumbing to blood loss. It's quite well done and makes me think that this show has something to it. More than anything, it makes me want to root for this woman, which is very important for a story like this, where it's all about her getting her life back together. I'm excited to see where this goes. This one's worth a soft recommendation. Gushing Over Magical Girls is a story with a compelling hook. A girl loves magical girls and gets recruited by someone looking to make her a magical girl, but the twist is that she is a magical girl for the villains. Egads! As fun as the story is, it's also got a major thing wrong with it, and that's the incessant sexualization of girls that I am very, very uncomfortable seeing sexualized. I didn't finish episode 1, I honestly just refuse to watch something like that, so not much to say here, do not recommend. Metallic Rouge is interesting in all of the best ways. It's an original anime, made by Studio Bones and being helmed by a very experienced scriptwriter. The story is at once cliché and ambitious, taking subject matter which many have attempted with mixed levels of success. A sci-fi story about android civil rights. And the start of the story indicates it's doing a pretty good job, especially by not being too far shoved up its own ass. The first episode is very Cowboy Bebop-esque, if that makes any sense, throwing you into a story that feels like a snapshot of a much larger world, with a lot having to be intuited by context clues. The whole thing is very character-driven, with both Naomi and Rouge, the two protagonists, seeming very in-depth and coming off as likable, though they also do kind of seem like they're obviously working for the bad guys, which sours things slightly, but not too much on account of the fact that we're definitely supposed to be questioning them. It's Studio Bones, so the action is absolutely amazing. The soundtrack is an absurd bop, and the animation and atmosphere are brilliantly made. It's a shame how little this is being pushed. It feels like it should have been taken up by Netflix and pushed onto a wider audience, since it's so accessible yet so prestige. I'm not sure it will 100% stick the landing on everything it's going for, but it has great fundamentals, and it has made the great choice of making the story character-oriented rather than being too up its own ass with themes that have been done before. It's not about if androids should be free, it's a story about an android discovering what freedom means. A definite recommendation on this one. If I had a nickel for every time a fantastic story with incredibly wholesome content but a title that sounds like a kinky erotica got an incredible anime adaptation, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't enough, frankly, but 'Tis Time for Torture Princess is something I can't complain about. It just makes me smile. The plot is about the princess of the Empire, which is at war with the demons, getting captured by the demons. Then, they decide to get information out of her through torture, but in demon society, torture is an incredibly innocent concept. Torture, the demon who administers the torture, does not harm the princess, instead cooking delicious food in front of her and offering it in exchange for secrets. Everyone who comes in to torture her brings her delicious food, plays fun games with her, and offers her wholesome experiences her old life never provided for her, and she quickly becomes more at home in this cell than she ever did in the castle. The whole thing is absurdly heartwarming and wholesome, and I've read the manga start to finish. I'm even planning on making a video about it someday, though it'll be long and I have other more immediate priorities, so who knows when that will be. Regardless, it's an incredibly funny and lovable comedy that you should all watch. I recommend this one. A Sign of Affection is an anime that I want to love. The idea behind it is fantastic. It's an anime about a deaf woman finding love, and a huge focus is on Japanese sign language, including some careful animation of the signs. It's covering a topic that fascinates me, as ASL is one of the 3 languages I want to learn other than English, and it's animated incredibly carefully. The whole thing is just so nice and wholesome and comfy and fascinating. I just wish it was for a different couple, man. The main couple isn't bad, per se. The guy isn't toxic, and it's not like they have no chemistry. They just have some... The guy acts kind of nice towards her, and she gets a crush. She's kind of cute around him, and he gets a crush. Hoo boy, a romance for the ages. Ugh. I don't want to trash on an anime that's clearly perfectly fine. It's at worst inoffensive and bland, and at its best, it's entirely unique and incredibly cool to see. I love seeing the deaf experience represented like this. I love the little details of, like, how she can still hear the vibrations of people's speech, or how she can tell when someone is talking about her just by watching their demeanor change. It does so much of what I want, the couple is so boring! It's cute, and if you're interested in the subject, I'd recommend it, but I'm not sure I'd recommend it that hard. Mr. Villain's Day Off is a cute little series set in a satirical rendition of a Super Sentai show. Think Love After World Domination. You have a bunch of villains, these ones being invaders from outer space, and some Earthlings who turn into Power Rangers need to save the world from these guys. The story follows the leader of the division of aliens attacking Earth, who explores the world and enjoys it on his days off. He learns to enjoy new food, he has positive interactions with some of the heroes who are also off duty, and he develops a deep love for pandas. It's adorable and goofy, and it's great seeing him slowly learn to love this world, such that one day he might not want to conquer it anymore. Despite the comparison I made to Love After World Domination in the world building and tone, the actual stories told are very different, and the whole thing is quite fresh feeling. It's a cozy blend of comedy and slice of life vibes, mixed with weird fish out of water stuff that makes it all feel unique and enjoyable. I admit that I read ahead in the manga in this one too, and I just want to say that since I need at least 4 paragraphs in all of these anime, that there is the start of a romantic subplot between him and the Pink Ranger, but it is the slowest burn of all time, and I don't think the anime will get to the point where anything happens, because God knows the manga hasn't, and I am a very normal person about this ship, which has had like 3 total moments, and I am totally 100% normal about it. I recommend this one, it's good. Soko Yoko is a fantasy action anime set in feudal Japan, starring a wandering ronin who's trying to stop a group of brigands who've started terrorizing a local area, hoping such a thing will help him grow strong. He winds up crossing 2 people who are truly strong, spirit people with incredible combat prowess. The girl is a spirit who is fond of humans and wants to talk sense into the brigands without hurting them. Doing so obviously fails, so our protagonists wind up beating up the brigands. They go on their way, but the ronin follows them in hopes that he can become strong like they are. The story's concept is simple, but the writing is, if nothing else, very clever. It knows how to put a lot of good small twists into the story so that it keeps you engaged and thinking. The younger brother of the spirit girl talks about how humans suck, and how the violence of the brigands is just like humans. It's to be expected, only for a few minutes later it to be revealed that it's actually a spirit behind this clan of brigands. The protagonist early on mentions his secret technique, but then he gets built up as being very worthless and weak compared to the other 2, but then his secret technique is used and actually works. It's full of small things like that which are quite nice from a screenwriting perspective. This is added on to the fact that the cast is fairly likable. The trio are all different and bounce off each other very well, while clearly having a lot of growing to do between them. The sister's mix of naivete and wisdom leading her to show people up while trying truly silly things, her brother's reluctance to follow her plans and his snarky attitude, the protagonist's bluster and susceptibility to teasing, it all works together quite well. But while the base is there for a good story and the cast is strong, the plot itself is hardly compelling so far, with their motivations being interesting, but not that emotionally gripping. Additionally, while the fights are definitely cool, and there is some sakuga, the directing and editing is choppy in a way that lends it a very cheap quality. Overall, the story has a lot to love, but it's pretty skippable. I give it a soft recommendation. Life of Pane was a roller coaster of a first episode, a roller coaster which crashed directly into the dirt halfway through. The vibes were immediately potent, with a phenomenal score that matched the troublemaking loser protagonist and her best friend's antics. They were kicked out of the house for being noisy, so now they have to find a new hangout place. If they can get this mahjong parlor cleared out and ready for business, they'll have the place to themselves, according to, I think it was her dad, maybe her uncle. So it's looking to be a fairly normal anime. Until a mahjong spirit appears out of a piece that she picks up. Is it going to start some grand fantastical adventure with her? Are we getting a gaming shonen with a rare female protagonist? No, it's not that. You learn fairly quickly that it's just going to be everyone hanging out in this mahjong parlor playing mahjong. And not playing in any interesting way. The story doesn't concern itself much with strategy or the intrinsic drama of the gamble. We're not seeing their hands slowly develop while watching their strategies unfold. They're just sort of playing it in the background while they talk about mahjong or completely unrelated matters. In practice, it's a cute girls being cute show where they make the occasional Akagi reference. You know, that landmark manga and anime about mahjong written by legendary Nobuyuki Fukumoto, which does actually concern itself with, you know, all the things that make the game interesting, like strategy and stakes. I do not recommend this one. BCIgiri is an anime with layers to it. Directed by the woman who did Free and produced by MAPPA, it has some very large Technicolor shoes to fill, and let me tell you, it is something. On a material level, it is a story about a young boy in high school who finds a muscle genie who demands he make a wish, and the boy's wish was to lose his virginity. But since the genie can only help him by giving him the ability to punch things hard, he follows the boy around on his escapades to get laid while helping him whenever he enters a fight. In the process of pursuing this one girl he likes, who is secretly a psycho, our hero winds up in the middle of a turf war between two rival gangs, both of whom want him for his fighting prowess, his love interest on one side, his childhood friend on the other. On a more substantive level, though, BCIgiri is also another thing. It is all of that, but on top of that, it is a story of the one straight man in a yaoi bait show desperately trying to get laid while accidentally making a bunch of men who could kick his ass fall in love with him for his ability to kick their ass. The only other two straight characters are the girl he likes, who is a psycho brocon, and his mother, who is the perfect woman. I would go to war for her. It's an odd story with a lot of choices, but it is very visually appealing, with great environments based on Chinese and Arabic culture, and some truly impressive fight animation. Combine that with the existence of Winter 2024's Best Girl, and I have found plenty of reason to keep up with this. I recommend BCIgiri. Cherry Magic, 30 Years of Virginity Can Make You a Wizard, is about a man who, after 30 years of virginity, gained a magic power, the ability to read the minds of people he touches. Apparently, most people he accidentally touches in day-to-day life think he's gross and unappealing, which is difficult to comprehend because he's very attractive and also isn't the character in this show who does the weird stuff, but it's necessary for the plot for him to have no female love interests, because this man has attracted a male love interest. His super popular, absurdly handsome coworker everyone loves is revealed to be passionately and obsessively in love with the protagonist. That's right, folks, we're doing gay moso telepathy. And hey, nothing wrong with gay moso telepathy. In fact, there's a lot about the story that I like. The couple is cute, both characters are likable for at least 85% of their screen time, and they actually make an effort to explain why the popular one is in love with the bland protagonist. It's not an amazing effort, but it's not a terrible one either. I just kind of wish that the story was a little less, I think ominous is the word. The love interest does stuff that is kind of over the line, like buying pajamas he thinks the protag would look good in, and then, when the opportunity arises, bringing the protag over and dressing him up in said pajamas, and the protagonist is aware of these intentions. A non-insignificant part of the story is the protagonist worried that he's going to get assaulted, and I don't know about you, but that sort of sours the vibe for me. The couple is fine. Weird stuff aside, the biggest sin that this story makes is the same as Sign of Affection, which is a main couple that's just not that interesting or engaging. The author seeming to have no ambitions above making them come off as kind of cute, which I guess they are. If gay Moso telepathy sounds like your kind of thing, then go watch this. Otherwise, it's probably not worth the watch. Not too much boys' love gets adapted, which is a shame, so if you're hungering for it, this will scratch that itch, but as someone who is just looking for good romance anime in general, it's pretty average on that front. Delusion's monthly magazine is yet another original anime starting this season, and it is positively delightful. It's about a bunch of editors for a conspiracy theory magazine being approached by someone involved in an actual conspiracy having to do with ancient magical artifacts, and then their boss hires this person to join their magazine. They then hunt down these ancient stone tablets called Moparts, which allow you to turn into a battle-ready fursona, and the race is on, because Femboy Team Rocket is also trying to hunt these down. If you didn't follow that, don't worry. I don't think most of the characters are following it. That's kind of where half of the charm comes from. The tone is deeply silly, and it absolutely knows what it's doing. It's not trying to be high art, and is instead trying to be goofy, good fun with a lovable cast and compelling premise. The conspiracy angle gives it a lot of interesting theming to work with, and the protagonists are all super fun, from the guy with the ability to see ghosts who just wants to find a hot, rich wife to take care of him, to his more serious, tomboyish best friend who has a crush on him, to the over-enthusiastic and overly earnest newbie who is the only one who actually cares about the conspiracies, to their mysterious and glamorous boss with a friendly but menacing aura, to dog! The end result is something very comfy, but nothing too stimulating. It's good if you're looking for a fun time, and it is filled with heart and personality, but it's not exactly groundbreaking. I'd recommend this one. Snack Basue is one of the two anime I didn't make it through the first episode of. The first was gushing over Magical Girls, which I stopped watching because of how uncomfortable it was, but this one I stopped watching because it was just, painfully unfunny and poorly put together. What was so bad about it? Well, I'll hold you in suspense on that one. I don't want to watch enough of this goddamn anime in order to form an opinion that's detailed enough to satisfy you guys, but I would be willing to if you give me the right incentive. If I get even one new patron on my Patreon, linked in the description, after this video, I will make a patron-only video about the first episode and everything I hate about it. Skip it! Bang Brave, Bang Bravern is a new mecha anime IP produced by Masami Obari, and it is a lot. The plot, put simply, is about humanity, who produced mechas for warfare, getting invaded by aliens and then having to use those mechas to fight the aliens, but the aliens are too strong. If not for some crazy sentient mecha that falls from the sky and graces our protagonist with its incredible power. There's a lot going on here tonally. It starts with a war scene that, surprise, surprise, turns out to be a joint training exercise between Japan and America. There's this softly jingoistic men being men hoorah atmosphere with all of the attendant heroic archetypes, friendly rivalries, and accidental homoeroticism, only for everything to be undercut by countless people dying in a sudden invasion, only for that to be undercut by the introduction of a sentient mecha that diegetically plays its own goofy theme music. We go from Top Gun to Gundam to Gurren Lagann in 10 minutes. Each side has their own ace pilot, and all of the classic associated tropes are thrown out, including the fighting ace who breaks formation but winds up being more effective that way. It's, one of those shows. It's cliché while managing to be earnest, and for that it does deserve props. Frankly, this feels like the kind of thing that Bellman should be talking about instead of me. If you want to see all of this getting dissected, then go and check out his channel. I'll link you my favorite video of his in the description. It's about the Gundam colony drop. There's a better than even chance he'll wind up talking about Bravern, just based on what I know about him, and if this interests you, you'll like a lot of his content. Though, he's rushing ahead of me in view count, so if you subscribe to him, subscribe to me first. And the Patreon, remember in the description. Anyways, I recommend this to anyone who's one of those weird military people, or if you're a mecha fan. Meiji Gekkan 1874 is yet another original anime, this one being a historical drama set in the year of, you guessed it, 1874, during a politically tense time in Japanese history. Our protagonist was the survivor of a war on the side of the people who lost, and in the aftermath of it all, he's trying to fulfill the last request of his dead friend, to find and protect said friend's sister, who's also the protagonist's arranged fiancée. Along the way, he gets accused of a murder, finds the real culprit, and gets an offer to join the police force of the very nation he fought to prevent the formation of. And along the way, a group of ninja weirdos are scheming some wild schemes and killing a whole bunch of people with cool ninja tools. It's all very atmospheric, intense, engaging, and cozy in that way a lot of genre fiction can get. The action is good, and the environments are designed absolutely beautifully. It is a visually very pleasing show, and handling an aspect of Japanese history I've rarely seen with an anime, so it's genuinely fascinating, and it helps that the protagonist is genuinely very likable. He cares about honor in a way that comes off as cool, but he's not particularly stiff and is full of life, not to mention fairly proactive. There are politics, potentially some romance, there's action, there's a weird squad of mini-bosses with cartoon personalities. It seems like a tropey, fun time with a great budget behind it. This one definitely gets my recommendation. Alright, so it's time to rank these, starting with F tier. This will only have 2 different anime, the criteria for F tier being that it's so bad that it feels unethical for it to exist. At the bottom of F tier is gushing over Magical Girls for what I will just call obvious reasons. At the top of F tier is Snack Basue for reasons which, once again, I won't go into detail on until you guys pay me, but the short version is that it is unfunny, animated in this ugly, interpolated style, and that it is unfathomably awkward, and not in the charming way it's trying to be. Next is D tier. Perfectly watchable anime that are nevertheless not worth your time. At the bottom of this is my instant death ability is so overpowered no one in this other world stands a chance. This is a truly sad anime, so obsessively focused on seeming edgy and original that it winds up being one of the most forgettable. Every plot beat drips with desperation for a daring aesthetic with not a bit of substance beneath the surface. It is the worst anime this season that I can at least stomach the existence of. Next worst is Tales of Wedding Rings. This one is pretty damn simple. It came in with a premise and then immediately ruined it. It's an action romance centered around a main couple, and the main couple is ass. Just above that, we have Fluffy Paradise. This is admittedly a jump in quality compared to the last 2, since it manages to actually accomplish something narratively, in this case, being sort of comfy, but that is the most it does, with so much of what it's going for feeling fumbled or just poorly thought out. Unwanted Undead Adventurer is a good deal better. Don't get me wrong, it's generic, poorly thought out, and lacking in substance, but like Fluffy Paradise, it manages to accomplish to some degree its main goal, in this case being a level-up procedural, and that's somewhat compelling to watch if nothing else. Life of Pane is a show that I almost considered putting in C tier, because I know I'm not really its target demographic, but frankly there's so much fumbling of its core premise that I can't justifiably put it higher than D. It is a cute girls being cute show about mahjong, except mahjong isn't utilized, so it doesn't even have its gimmick going for it. It has a good score, and there seems to be heart behind it, but I'm not really a fan. Next, we get to Hokkaido Gals Are Super Adorable. This has the budget and prestige of a, actual romance anime, and the fact that it's very well produced and has decent writing at parts does jump it up a few places, but it is just so much less than the sum of its parts. It postures as being this love story, but if you ignore all the wish fulfillment, the actual story here does not seem worth it in any capacity. At the top of D tier, we have the strongest tank's Labyrinth Raids. A tank with a rare 9999 resistance got kicked from the hero's party. Generic? Yes. Boring? Also yes. Cliched from start to finish for the entire first episode? Absolutely. But it is a story with fairly solid execution of its kind of lame ideas. A likable protagonist, competent fight scenes, and some clever writing choices make this one of the only things in D tier that's actually worth watching, but even then, that's only if you're really desperate for more lit RPG junk food. Next up is C tier. C tier stuff is anime that I feel is good enough that it's worth recommending to people whom it is specifically appealing to. If one of these sounds like it's 100% your cup of tea, then definitely check it out. You'll probably have a fantastic time with it. Otherwise, these are safe to skip. We have 6 in C tier, and in last place is A Sign of Affection. Man, this is something I so wanted to love, but As things are, I am merely appreciating it from a distance. The premise is amazing, and the execution of its premise is fantastic, but it's all dancing around a core romance that's just, from first impressions, bland. I can't really recommend this to someone who isn't explicitly interested in the sign language aspect of it. Just above that, we have Cherry Magic. This is another romance story with a great concept I want to love, but a core couple which just isn't clicking for me. They are, at the very least, more entertaining than the duo in A Sign of Affection, even if that entertainment value comes from how creepy things can get sometimes. It does at least make me laugh, but I really didn't need to see more than one episode myself. But if gay Moso telepathy activated your neurons, then this is probably something you'd want to check out. Then we have Villainous Level 99. I may be the hidden boss, but I'm not the Demon Lord. This one I recommended eagerly because I'm, the target demographic of this anime, so I got a bit excited. It's definitely only for people explicitly interested in otome isekais or interested in getting into them, since this is a fairly accessible one if you're familiar with normal isekais but not with otome isekais. And that's due to the RPG mechanics and power fantasy elements. There's a lot here that's familiar, but leads you into the genre. Otherwise, though, you'd probably find it a bit underwhelming as a story. Sasaki and Peeps is trying very hard to be clever, and it is somewhat succeeding. If you are looking for an isekai story with a compelling protagonist and a lot of very meta elements, this is doing that pretty alright, but it feels more like an author having fun with a series of plot hooks than it does an actual story. But hey, if that sounds fun to you, this'll be a fun time. Dr. Elise is another otome isekai, this one with a much more ambitious and engaging premise. It has a lot of issues with pacing, but when it clicks, it really clicks, demonstrating that this is a story that's really trying to do something. If the subject matter is interesting to you, then I'd give it a whirl for sure. Speaking of ambition, Ishura is fascinating with an incredibly interesting first episode. It was gripping and managed to be meta in a way that feels fairly diegetic, if that makes any sense. Like, I'm in on the joke here, but the show isn't just winking at me all the time. All of that said, it's also got major issues in its execution, and I am a bit uncertain where the story is planning on going from here. But if you find it fascinating, then I'm sure there's a lot of interesting stuff if you watch along, which for some reason I haven't done yet, even though this video is like 4 weeks late. And capping off the top of C tier is Soko Yoko. This isn't as ambitious as Ishura, but it just feels really solid. It has a great cast, some clever writing, and it feels like the start of a really fun Odyssey-style story in a world I want to see more of. It just is missing that last little push to go from a fun little story to a truly great show worth watching, which is why it barely doesn't make it into B tier. Speaking of B tier, let's get into it. B tier anime are anime which have that little special something. They aren't just things that are worth your time, but things that I think are genuinely impressive. All of these are worth watching if you have the time. We have 7 anime in this slot, so let's get to it. At the bottom, we have Bang Brave, Bang Bravern, a delightful piece of mecha war fiction. Bravern is certainly confident and brimming with life, full of tropes that are executed with love and, I guess you could call it, panache. The production value is there too, and it's got some names behind it. It is definitely for a certain type of person, but I'm really considering watching more of this anime just because of the energy behind it. Following that up, we have Mr. Villain's Day Off. This is just a positively delightful slice-of-life comedy anime with a really interesting hook. Not only is it set in a Super Sentai story, but it's about the villain slowly learning why he's the bad guy, as he slowly, bit by bit, learns why the world he's conquering deserves to exist in its current state. It's got a lot of heart and is just a delight to watch. Next up, we have Delicious in Dungeon. Look. I know that this story is apparently a masterpiece, and I know that I did kind of cheat by watching past episode 1 with solo leveling, but I didn't get around to doing that with this show, and frankly, based on episode 1, this is where it belongs. It is a super fun, super cozy romp full of life and original ideas, with really lovable characters. Realistically, this should, from what I've heard, belong in A or S tier, but whatever. I'll watch the rest eventually, I promise. The Weakest Tamer began a journey to pick up trash is an anime that I feel like will probably go downhill after its absolutely brilliant first episode to the point that I'm afraid to watch more, but man, this is the best opening I've seen to an isekai, full of emotion, passion, and expertly crafted beauty. I'm sure the team who put this together will find many more ways to wow me if I ever decide to keep watching. Seventh Time Loop is an amazing example of its genre, a genre I am quite partial to, being adapted to an impressive extent. The Sakuga, man, the Sakuga! The whole thing handles its subject matter in really cool and refreshing ways that newcomers and veterans of the genre can both enjoy, and it's full of some genuinely clever twists and adorable moments with a couple who, oh my god, actually has chemistry. This is a great way to get into otome isekais, and if you're already into them, this is a must-watch. The Wrong Way to Use Healing Magic is one of the best standard isekai stories I have ever watched. It takes its derivative nature in stride, glossing over the fact that the story has been done to death before, and focusing instead on impeccable execution. A great trio of likable protagonists with distinct personalities and great chemistry between them, a genuinely charming romantic subplot, a fantastic training arc. It all just works. Yes, I also cheated on this one by watching Head. Shut up. It's good, okay? I like it, okay? It's a good one. Anyways, topping off B tier is Delusional Monthly Magazine, and oh, what a show this is. It is a delightful science fantasy romp with heavy comedy and action elements, one of the best casts of weirdos in the entire season, and just the weirdest ideas. It all comes together great and makes you wonder just what will happen next in this fantastically strange misadventure. It all comes together to be more than the sum of its parts, and I am so here for it. Also, you gotta love it when a show has a theme song sung by the voice actors in character with lyrics describing the show in a super hokey way. I love this anime. Next, we have A tier. A tier is for anime which are not merely impressive, but outright exceptional, worthy of being actively recommended to general anime viewers long after they stop airing. And in this slot, we have 4 different anime. Fair warning, I'm actively watching all of these and have watched past episode 1. Starting off, we have Meiji Gekkan 1874, another anime original. This one has truly splendid vibes, a great mix of mystery, action, and political drama, all taking place in an evocative period setting. The characters are great, the animation is great, the plot is compelling. It's all around a fantastically put together intro to what will surely be an amazing story. Yeah, I finished catching up after I wrote this part. It is amazing. It is a great story. I kept watching. It's still good. Next up, we have 'Tis Time for Torture Princess. This is the adaptation of a positively stellar manga that I cannot recommend enough. And it got the dream adaptation. This is one of the most innovative and wholesome comedies I've seen in a while, doing genuinely interesting things I didn't have the time to get into during this video, and it does it all with great animation and care. After that, we have BCIgiri. What a wild show, but such a well put together and carefully thought out one. It's juggling a lot, but it is showing care to all of it and definitely seems to come together nicely. It's great to see a protagonist who kind of sucks being handled right. The animation is great, the mom is perfect, the scenery is so cool, I just love this one. It's good, dumb fun with some genuinely good emotional bits and great action. You can't go wrong with that. And at the top of A tier, we have The Witch and the Beast, an excellent adaptation of an excellent manga, brought up even higher by a fantastic English cast in the dub. The aesthetic is breathtaking and refreshing, with the way it handles its action and world building being impactful and intriguing. And all of it is tied together by 2 excellent leads that bounce off each other incredibly beautifully. This feels like a manga that could really be looked back on as a classic, and an anime adaptation that is worthy of it. But it's not quite there, which is why it's an A tier and not S tier. S tier is reserved for stories which I feel will be looked back on as must-watch anime in a lot of people's eyes. Things which stand out not just among the seasonal chaff, but among the whole medium, and this season had 2 of them. I debated a little bit about how to order them, but in the end I decided to start with Metallic Rouge. Metallic Rouge is so many amazing things. It is stylish, introspective, visually gorgeous, has an amazing soundtrack, lovable characters, and an incredibly engaging plot. Though the plot is also something some people find lacking. It is intentionally leaving a lot vague, and while I can't really call that a fault because it's something I love about it, it's definitely preventing it from being as widely appealing as possible. But with so much thought, effort, and talent behind this, with it being so high concept and yet expertly executed, it feels like a modern masterpiece. But for two reasons it takes second place. The first is that the aforementioned vagueness turns a lot of people off, and the other is something very special about our first place candidate, solo leveling. Solo leveling feels like the producers are trying to make it the next multi-season blockbuster, a la Attack on Titan. It's made from incredible source material. Solo leveling is known as one of the best handled power fantasy stories out there, and on top of that, there is an absurd amount of talent and care poured into every single episode, every single scene. Sawano's soundtrack, combined with the beautiful and striking visuals, combined with incredible writing that knows how to properly handle tension, makes for something which isn't quite as high concept as Rouge, but something that is definitely going to be remembered as a classic. And there you have it. Everyone who watched all the way, thank you so much. Make sure to like and leave a comment, subscribe with notifications on, and if you want to make sure that the Snack Basue video gets made, then subscribe to my Patreon. And as always, a thank you to my patrons, especially my Tier 2 patrons, Bellman, Carolyn Vig, and Love Your Content. I plan to have this out by early February. It wound up coming out late February because, well, a lot wound up happening in the month of February. It was a very, very stressful month, a very, very busy month for me. But I am starting to get back into the kick of things. Is that even a figure of speech? I'm planning on March being a lot more active. I have a lot of scripts already in the writing process. I have a video that just needs the video editing on it done. That should be uploaded fairly soon. So stay tuned for a lot of great, awful anime content.